All right. Well, I'm excited to be introducing you all to Serena today, who's going to be running the webinar. And I'll just be here on the side in the chat and able to facilitate any questions as well.
Hello. Thanks for the intro, Dan. I'm Serena. I am a research advocate here at Dovetail on our customer experience team. Formerly was on the customer success team, working side by side with Dan and partnering with our customer teams. One of the biggest questions that always comes up is, how do I put together my taxonomy? And so we get this question a lot and coach teams around how to do it. And we're like, you know what, let's just put together a webinar so we can actually walk through these steps and help more people approach their taxonomy. The goal for today is for you to feel confident about the exact steps you need to take to get started in crafting your taxonomy. We will also have some takeaways for you after this session that we'll send out in a follow-up email. You will also have a recording of this available to you to reference at any point in time. And then you'll be able to really jumpstart with the rest of your team in terms of approaching whether you're getting started for the first time with your tagging taxonomy or iterating as you go or doing a full restructuring. So we will also have some stories from a customer team who went through this themselves recently. I'll be sharing some tips from Iris Barrera at Verizon Connect, who we had a conversation recently about how their team went about aligning around creating their taxonomy, rolling out it across the team, and some governance tips and tricks that they have. So very excited for you to also hear from one of our customers. And as well, feel free to drop questions in the chat. Thank you so much, Dan and Emily, for helping moderate the chat. We'll also have some time at the end there for some Q&A. All right, I'll go ahead and share my screen here. So as part of helping you all approach your tagging taxonomy, we are actually going to be sharing out after this webinar a template that I've created that'll walk you through step-by-step how to craft your taxonomy in Dovetail. If you're not already familiar, take a look here in the community section. We have lots of Dovetail and community created project templates. So you can just install that and jump into whether it's, for a particular research method. And we also have tag board templates. So that could be another great place to draw some inspiration as you're thinking about how to restructure your taxonomy. So take a look here in the community section, and we'll link out the project template that I'm walking through today that we'll have available for you all to download and jump right into. So this is the template that I'll be walking us through today with those 4 steps to crafting your taxonomy. Again, this will be made available to you all. You can install it into your Dovetail workspace and just walk through each of the steps we go over today. Here in the README, we provide a little bit of an overview. And these are the 4 steps we'll be covering today in crafting your taxonomy. Just a heads up, took a look at the poll earlier. It doesn't look like we have anyone who's particularly brand new to Dovetail. If this is kind of the first time you're hearing about some of these terms, I would recommend maybe just pausing right now and going and checking out some of our getting started videos, just since we're going to be diving a lot deeper into some more advanced topics. So you'll always be able to reference back to this. So really the 4 steps we're going to cover today. First, schedule a workshop with your stakeholders. Second, designing guiding questions to align around crafting your taxonomy. Third, how to define and then map it to Dovetail. And fourth, revisiting and reviewing your taxonomy. So we'll give you tips all the way from how to bring people to the table, align around starting to structure your taxonomy, and then how to bring that into Dovetail, and then actually get tips around your ongoing governance practice. For each of these 4 steps, I'll go ahead and share recommendations and very concrete actions for you and your team to take, why this is important, and then also include a highlight reel with tips and tricks from Iris Barrera. We'll also include the link to the webinar here so that once you download this project template, you can reference the video anytime and just kind of follow along and move at your own pace. So let's jump into the guide here on the left-hand side. And I'm actually going to move into present view here in Dovetail. Awesome. So to get started, I know it can be kind of daunting, right? You might be either starting from scratch with a taxonomy, or maybe you've had some tags already created as you're getting started. And it can be kind of challenging to know where to start. And I know it can seem like a big undertaking, but you're not alone. And also, this is why we're having this session, so we can really help you feel confident in knowing exactly what steps to take and also the best practices along the way. So I just wanted to start by acknowledging that taxonomies are iterative and they are going to change over time. They're going to change based on the research methods you're doing, the product areas, your organizational changes. It's going to shift and change. So what we're encouraging you to do is get started with the structure, knowing that you're going to be maintaining and shifting it over time. I'm going to introduce you here to Iris Barrera, who is the Research Operations Coordinator of Verizon Connect. So she and I have been working closely together, and she actually just recently facilitated her team through setting up their taxonomy, and will be sharing some stories and best practices from their team's journey. So I'll go ahead and let Iris introduce herself. Well, thanks again so much for joining us and chatting a bit about how your team at Verizon Connect has been crafting your tagging taxonomy and bringing along your team in the process and rolling it out across your team and your company. Would love to maybe just get started with hearing about, what was that process like? How did you get started? What was kind of the state of your taxonomy at that point? I know you kind of joined the team at a unique time and point too, when people were starting to use Dovetail, and you were trying to kind of come in on the research ops side to like help organize that.
Yeah, it was definitely like a whole scenario. Like you said, I came into the team when our research ops team was just me, and being just me, I was still kind of learning the whole space of research ops. So it was just kind of like, hey, everybody, let's get on this boat together and see what happens. Which is great. I'm very glad that we have a team that's so healthy and very supportive in regards of like, hey, let's just go along together, see what happens. It was also a bit of a mess to begin with, honestly. Like I said, wasn't really aware of what I was doing up front, just because I was so new to the space. But at first I was just kind of like, you know what, like, just kind of go for it. Like, let's just have a little free for all and just start making tags. Like, I'll just see what the keywords that are popping up. And like, we'll give it about a month, maybe a month and a half, 2 months, and just go from there and see whatever we first started to use the tool. And when we were first using the tags, like we had a completely different mindset, and we're just like, hey, just do something.
Yeah.
So like those tags that were there, we were just like, okay, like now what do we do to these tags? And so kind of got around there. And then after that little free-for-all session, kind of had to like regroup and just like, okay, like we have stuff here, but it's like, what are we going to do with it now? And even then I was just kind of like, well, I don't really know what we're going to do with it, but we got to have some sort of structure to this, because obviously everyone was just kind of adding everything. And then it had also gotten to a point where it's like, I think I had mentioned to you in a different conversation where people will put like, oh, number 17 colon like XYZ, and I'm just like, great. I know that person knows what that is, but nobody else does. So it's like, how do we bridge that gap in between everything?
So really a lot of it was around, acknowledging that it can often feel kind of messy at the start, and that's just the case for a lot of folks. You're not alone if you're feeling that way. Second of all, that it's a chance to also kind of revisit your internal processes. So it's a chance to do some housekeeping. It's a chance to align folks around research practices. And that brings us to our first step here, which is actually scheduling a workshop with your stakeholders. I recommend for this to start with your core team of folks doing research. You can hold multiple in the future, but for this very first one, it's great to bring people to the table who will be using these tags. You can bring, tags you have used in the past for research, but really just start whiteboarding out what are these different tags that you want to start for your taxonomy framework. We include some tips here. So with each session, bring in the core team to get a sense of what tags are important to each person, and then also each research method. You may have different tags you're using for usability testing versus analysis of survey responses versus customer interviews. So think about what your different research methods are and what tags will be appropriate for each of those. You might also have certain tags that are relevant to different product lines or different teams who may be doing research. Some folks might be customer facing like myself versus product folks versus marketing. And so there may be some specific tags based on those different stakeholders.
I would say the one thing that like really got us to a better structure was hosting these taxonomy workshops. So I joined, or I had a session with each of our product line teams. And this is just with the research team, because at that point, we're really just like worried about the researchers only, because they're the ones that are mainly going to be doing the bulk of the work in there. Hosting those mini workshops within our team was, I would say, one of our big turning points to actually getting usage just within the platform as a whole, because everyone was going in there and uploading their interviews and getting those transcriptions done. But it was just kind of like, okay, how do we like get over that next little hurdle to like actually get real usage out of this? So yeah, those workshops were great and they really got us moving.
Okay, so step 2, now that you have that scheduled, how do you design those guiding questions to lead this workshop? We recommend that you start by brainstorming the key areas important to your organization, such as like, what are the business's decisions you're going to make? Align the tags to the strategy of your business. This might include things like, what are your product areas? What are your main research methods? Again, for different methods, you may have different tags that you're going to use. Who are your customer segments and personas? How do you classify pain points or customer feedback? And how will tags be consumed and by whom? So think too of tags as being used first for your analysis, as you're actually highlighting certain key moments and tagging and drawing themes, and then creating your insights. But also tags can be used to surface findings. So think about it from both of those perspectives. For instance, in our Dovetail workspace, one of our favorite tags is a customer love or a golden nuggets tag that is then surfaced into our feed in our homepage. So this is great because it just automatically pulls in any highlight with the customer love tag, and then you can just jump in and see what our customers have been saying about Dovetail. Really easy to then showcase and have that automatically updated with all of the newest quotes that we're hearing from our research. This is a really great jumping point for stakeholders who want to come in and start self-serving research findings. We'll go through in the next step, but we actually have built out in this project template a space for you to actually start mapping this out in Dovetail. So you can figure out if it makes more sense for you to do, if you're in person, you can start putting Post-it notes up on the board, or if you want to do a virtual whiteboard, you can start mapping out what that actually looks like. Why this step is important is, again, you get buy-in cross-functionally. It also helps you identify what are those different types of tag boards that you'll be setting up. Also make sure that you're able to create a taxonomy using terms that people are familiar with. And again, this also makes it much easier to surface findings across your workspace and makes it easier for stakeholders to find what they're looking for when they're actually trying to, use the searching and filtering.
At least within the research organization, we have 3 main product lines that we work out of, and then we have like small subset teams that we call clans that are within those product lines. So we're kind of able to kind of go off of that, like do a tag of like connected devices, which is one of our products, or video, and stuff along those. But I met with each of them and I was like, hey, I know these are your main product points within your product, just kind of make your little ladder of terms that fall within that product line and just go from there. So I gave them like 15-20 minutes in a Fig Jam board, and we're just kind of going in there. And since obviously they're all within a team, they kind of be like, oh, like, I see that you have this here, why don't you put this there? So they kind of started talking to each other, started building their own taxonomy. So I was just kind of there as like the back of house person, just like, oh yeah, just go along. And from there, we were able to make 3 of the board. And then one of our researchers in specific was able to kind of build something based off of persona, general sentiment within the company, billing, just like the generic terminology that goes around the company that's not specific to our products. And she really helped us build.
So now that you've brought all your stakeholders to the table and run this session, where do we go from here? Step 3 here is actually to define and map it to Dovetail. So now that you have the structure for your taxonomy, go ahead and bring in some definitions for each of those tags. This is really great because, again, it helps make sure everyone knows what this tag means and how to use it, since you may have many different people in Dovetail engaging with the tags and with different contextual knowledge too. And then to actually bring it into Dovetail, I'll show you what that looks like in just a moment. Some tips for building out your taxonomy. keeping the tag short and sweet. So a few words rather than a very long sentence. We like to say, you know, if you can't say in a few words, that's probably too granular for it to be a tag. And that might actually be more appropriate as an insight, as a research finding. So keep the tag short and sweet. And then you can write a description for the tag. I'll also show you in a moment where that is. When you click into a tag, you can actually have free text there, and that can be anything from a definition to guidance around how people can use the tag in practice during analysis. And also you can take a look again at the community tag boards for inspiration. We've got a good number of them there created by both our team and customer teams. And once you've created these tags, consider which ones you might want to have at a local project level versus a global workspace level. So workspace tag boards, you can apply across projects. You can connect them to templates and they automatically show up when someone creates a new project from the template. So that again, really jumpstarts your team, makes it really easy for people to just get started with doing research with the tags available. And you know that'll also be consistent. So a few tips on how to determine whether they should be local project tags or global workspace tags is that research is often conducted in projects, and Dovetail takes a pretty project-centric approach to organizing data. So project tags are really useful for teams when you prefer to maintain tag sets that are really contextual to the project you're working on. Or maybe you're kind of doing like a ground-up model where you want to tag and create tags on the fly and see what emerges. So that's where it makes sense to have project level tags. But the workspace level tags then allow you to have tags used across projects, and it enables stakeholders to then have that shared knowledge base. And it makes it much easier then to surface findings across projects and across your whole workspace. So here's a little tip here for you all. To streamline your research efforts, connect workspace tags to project templates, so they're automatically available for people who come in and start a new project. We cover a bit of that in our prior webinars that Dan had mentioned earlier around setting up your workspace architecture. And we also have another one that Emily had run, which is around tidying your tags and how to manage your project level tags to your workspace level tags, how to move them. So that is there for you to dive into. Why this step is especially important is, again, it really helps standardize the research processes across your team and makes it really easy to onboard people to Dovetail, since they can just click in, create a new project from a template and get started. This, again, also is key for making it easy to surface research findings across your workspace, especially with those workspace tag boards, and makes it much easier for stakeholders to find what they're looking for.
You can kind of like pull up all of our tags and you'll see a bunch of like stuff within the getting started journey, but then there's like 50 getting started journey tags, and we're just like, oh, it's a lot of tags to comb through. So we had moved it all into a workspace board that we have. So that one's kind of there like just mainly for verbatim. So that's just like the highlight parts, like, hey, if you want actual clips of the customers talking about what's going on in the stage, that workspace board for that customer journey stage is there. And I was like, hey, if you happen to find something that works for them, you can add their board to your project and kind of go from there. So I tried to kind of remove all of the extra back of house stuff of like having to add stuff, unlink stuff, to like hopefully just make it a little bit easier for them to go in and just actually use it. Because that was one random hurdle that we're like, well, okay, y'all have the tags here, like use them. Like what's going on? Like, why aren't you using them? So that was just another thing too, just adding the extension to the templates itself was able to get a lot more movement going on in those extensions. And it's going
and that streamlines it, because then it's like people can just get started, create a new project from a template, and all of those global tags are there for them to use. And then it also makes it easier down the line when you want to be able to surface the findings across your workspace, to be able to say, oh, okay, we now can align around this specific tag, and it's not in some cryptic code that someone's come up with as part of their research project, or, you don't have to worry as much about like, duplication of tags. So that's a great way to see kind of like your journey from, just people were creating tags on the fly at the beginning to then like bringing stakeholders in.
Some people were making tags as the insight, and they were kind of just like, well, now that I have the tag as an insight, I don't really know how to take it to the insight portion. And it's like, okay, well, maybe instead of making the insight of the tag, make it more of a generic theme keyword that you're using. And then by doing that, you might be able to pull in different tags to actually build what that insight was that you're mentioning in that first initial tag.
Awesome. So glad you can finally hear from Iris. We'll be downloading these and playing it for you as we go. I'm going to share my screen again here. Sweet. So the fourth step here now is once you have them in Dovetail, people are using them. Awesome. Step 4 is to revisit and review your taxonomy as you go. We recommend thinking of it as a governance practice. Build in a regular cadence with your core team. Maybe for a smaller team, this could be every 6 months. For larger teams, maybe once a quarter. And when you do this review process, think of it as just housekeeping for your Dovetail workspace and for your research practice as a whole. You can start by reviewing your tag boards and identify tags with a high highlight count. These might be too broad, and you can consider getting a little more granular with the tag themselves. So a very common one I see is maybe there's one single pain point tag with like over 300 highlights associated with that one tag. When you actually click that tag, it doesn't give you very much information. Okay, so it's a pain point, but what is it related to? What is the actual need there? You can consider then, instead of having the one pain point tag, you can have a pain point tag group or board with more specific tags that point to what those pain points are. On the flip side, with tags with a low highlight count, maybe these are too granular or too similar to other tags that already exist in the workspace. So you could find similar ones and either delete or merge them together. Again, in the Tidying Tags webinar that we'll link out after this, really great step-by-step tips of how to do that. And then for project tags or tag boards with high usage, so these might be, tag boards that actually resonate across a lot of different projects. Consider these to be promoted then to a workspace tag board, or otherwise known as a global tag. So that way, you can actually be able to surface findings then across multiple projects. Why this step is important is this keeps things organized, makes your life easier. It makes it easier for the rest of your team, really helps reduce confusion and messiness in the workspace and just in your data. Also makes it much easier, again, to surface those research findings across your workspace. And it allows you to iterate your taxonomy over time and have it really be reflective and be useful to the kinds of research you're doing and the kinds of products that you're working on. I'll go ahead and play the reel here so we can hear from Iris. Would also love to hear about how you're going about kind of that taxonomy governance work of how are you, reviewing on a regular basis, like who's involved. I know you've mentioned like you kind of have these like archival swarms. Would love to hear a bit about that and like, what you're asking folks to do as part of that.
Yeah, so that's kind of like our cleanup session, cleanup / hey, go, if you're not in here, start putting stuff in here just so we all have it somewhere in the same place. Because we're obviously still in that odd phase of like, yeah, we got some like superstars like rocking in here, and then we still have some newbies still trying to figure it out. So it's a really weird like thing to kind of go through. It's really fun though. I really enjoy it. But yeah, those archival swarms is what we call them. We have them quarterly. We're actually gonna have one next week. And then tags, but we do like hey, like clean them up. We know that one's a little bit more of a heavy lift in regards to getting it done. So we're just like, hey, if you know that there is one specific project that you did over the quarter that was kind of like, oh, I need to really clean this up. That's where like, okay, maybe focus on that one if you want to. But like we are fully aware that it might not be done in this go, but we do try to set that time aside for them to go through and clean up their previous work over the quarter. And then one thing like outside of those archival swarms that like myself on the research ops side of it, that I do to try to keep the workspace clean on tags is just going in there and getting that like all tags view to pop up. So like in that search bar, I know you can just press tags and it'll have all of them show up, and then I'll have it kind of just go through and I'll start like looking around to see if like, are there any like multiple occurrences of the same tag? So I can kind of just go through and just be like, hey, like on Slack, like, hey, like I see this here, like, is it okay if I merge these tags for you? And they'll be like, oh yeah, and then just do it, and if not, I just leave it there. So that like, while it's not like I would say the most practical and like the easiest thing to do, it does clean it and keep it a little bit cleaner just throughout the quarter while we wait for those archival swarms to go by.
Yeah, that's such a great tip for being able to see your tags in one place. and being able to then like see maybe some project level tags and see some of the workspace tags and decide like, then what do you want to actually turn into a global tag and make that available for everyone? Because people will be making project level tags here and there as they go.
Yeah.
And to have that cadence built in to then kind of do that grooming, but like, okay, what do we want to merge or move, from project level to workspace level is a great practice to have.
It changes all the time. And like I said, we're in the process of cleaning up some of those tag boards to like maybe take the number down for maybe just 5 or 6 versus I'm going through and we kind of are like, oh, we made all these tags, but we're not really using them. So that's like another thing that all of us as the research team plus ops kind of had to come together. And it's kind of like, well, do we really need these? Like, even though we made them, it's just kind of like, we're not using them. And it's kind of like, why aren't we using them? So we actually spent some time earlier today talking about it. And it's like, oh, well, do y'all want these stuff? So that's the first stage that we started. And then once we kind of got those folks taken care of, we moved more into our actual users, or as we say, our contributors and managers within Dovetail. We did an all about tags session, and we were just really showing them like, hey, now that y'all know how to use these tags, here's how you could really level them up and make them not only usable for yourself, but also usable for those who are going to be coming in here searching for the content. So that's where that whole example of like the 17 colon came into place, where it's like, hey, I know this works for you, but it might not work for everybody else, unfortunately.
Great, awesome. So now that we've walked through those 4 steps to crafting your taxonomy, I want to actually show you what that looks like in terms of actually jumping in, working with this guide that we're going to share with you, and starting to actually build out your taxonomy in Dovetail. So here in the project, again, we had the README on the left-hand side, the guide, and we just walked through all of these steps together. On the left-hand side here, you'll have the tags. You can click into this taxonomy tag board, which will automatically be there as part of this template. And you'll notice here, I've actually mapped out different tag groups here based on each of those guiding questions we talked about. So you can fill in what are your different product areas, your personas, some examples of the class of feedback that we use here at Dovetail, and then some examples of types of research. So you can literally just come in here and say, if I were to fill this out for Dovetail, maybe we have the web app, we have our website, and our help center. As examples, you can fill it out based on your product areas or business units or pillars, however you organize as a company. And then you can also fill in your personas. So we've got researchers, research ops. You get the idea. These are some examples I'll leave here for class of feedback. You may classify your feedback differently. This just helps us come through and surface, okay, what were actually some major blockers for our customers, and then our product team can regularly go through and do a review and follow up and make sure that's actually reflected in our roadmap and how we prioritize our time and efforts, versus something that might be more a confusing matter. Then that might actually be a different challenge. It might be confusing in the app experience, but also maybe in just customer education. So then that leads to different solutions we could come up with. And for types of research here, I point this out because for different types of research, again, you may have different tags that you're using. For instance, you're going to have different tags for customer interviews versus usability testing. And once we had identified the different types of research we do, we then went ahead and made a different tag board for these different methods. Here on the left-hand side, I've actually pulled in a usability testing tag board that's available as in our community section for you to download as a template. So you can take a look at these and then build that out. So think of setting up different layers of tag boards that you may use. They can all be different sets of like globally used, like workspace tag boards. Some may be relevant to every single project you do in your Dovetail workspace. Others might be more specific to a product area or to a research method. And you can layer them in and connect as many as are relevant to the work you're doing. And again, pro tip, to make it easy for everyone, connect those workspace tag boards then to templates. So then what I'd recommend doing is once you've mapped it all out here in Dovetail, don't stress too much. If you need to move things around, very easy to do. You can move them from group to group or even move these to another board. Again, the Tidying Tags webinar gets into very much detail of best practices for that. When you click into a tag, this is where you can add a description. So define the tag, provide guidance around usage, and just anything else that might help align your team around what this tag actually means. Then what I'd recommend doing is for any of these tag boards you want to turn into global tags and turn it here into a workspace level tag board like we had for this taxonomy one. We can do the same for this usability testing one and convert it to a workspace tag board. This then makes it available to be linked to templates and to other projects and makes these tags available to be used across projects. Again, that really helps streamline your efforts, really helps make it easier to surface findings across your workspace, and just will streamline and clean up everything. All right, so that's a preview into how you can use this guide. Again, just start by moving through each of these steps. We will also have, as part of this, I know the audio wasn't working earlier, but you can click through and listen to Iris share some of the stories and best practices from steps 1 and 2. And I wanted to, before we move into the Q&A, just also have a chance to go through some closing tips from Iris. And we should have that downloaded. Here we go. What are some tips you have for others who are maybe about to start working on some of this with their teams? How to get started?
I mean, it takes time. That is one thing that I really had to embed in my brain, and to like just really be okay with that. It's not going to be done in an instant, because I'm very much like, I want things to be nice, polished, and pretty. Like, I don't like putting out like half done work, because it kind of feels that way to have like, in a way, half done, but you're kind of going through the process. But when you really think about it, there's stages that you go through to kind of like have that basic knowledge sharing stage, and then you kind of start getting into the onboarding and then really the enablement parts of it. So just being okay that it'll take some time and obviously not expect that it'll be perfect like right off the get-go. Stuff that I had done this time last year, I was kind of like, hey, this is the way it's going to be. I love it. Like, we're going to keep it that way. And a quarter later, I was just kind of like, oh, I kind of hate this. Like, I don't like the way I did this. I want to change it. So just being okay with change was also like another thing. So just being patient, know that it takes time, and, just spend time in there too. Like that is one thing that like where it took me to like really learn how to use the tool itself. It's just going in there and just doing stuff.
Yeah, I love that, kind of having this like beginner's mindset and growth mindset to it, and being like, you know what, this is the start of an ongoing process. And it's worth taking the time and effort to do that too, because then it lays a better foundation for the rest of the team and makes everyone's jobs a bit easier and streamlines the research process, and sets the rest of the workspace and the team up for success in the long term. But it also, takes ongoing work to cultivate. And I mean, that's why we so appreciate folks like you who are like helping streamline the research efforts for your team and recognizing like, yeah, this is a job, this is work.
I feel like I'm finally about to be at that point to where I can, what I say, push my baby bird out of the nest, and hopefully it'll have her wings and fly. Dovetail is my baby bird, and she will hopefully fly out of the nest within the next month. So we're definitely moving on to that next phase of like, okay, maybe we are going to be in that like maintenance mode within the next month or so. So I do see my little sunrise over the horizon coming in.
And recognizing it is an iterative process. It's not like, like you said, it's not like one and done. Once you figure out the taxonomy, you're done forever. It's like, oh, taxonomies grow and shift and change over time based on like your product lines or the types of research you're doing, or, the changes too, and like, your customer and markets and all of that. So accepting that change is inevitable, and that there are tools in place and features in place to help you also manage that. And also then building in like a structure to be able to like, tend, we joke on my team, the customer success team, that this is like tending to your tagger culture. Like, this is a garden, right? It's like things are growing and changing and evolving. And, this part of our role is to like kind of cultivate that.
Trying to get that standardization across the teams, expect a little tug of war to go on. Because while everybody is on the same page of like wanting to get it done, everyone has a different way of doing their job, and just figuring out like how one researcher goes through their process of conducting research versus another one, which is something that we had recently had to tackle also. We're kind of like in that phase of still trying to work out the kinks of like the different research processes that happen. While it's all qualitative research, everyone does it differently. So it's like, okay, how do we make this work for you, but also make it work for you at the same time, but making it easy to use for the both of y'all. So just going with the wind, like, is really the best thing to say. Just go with the wind.
Well, congrats on that, Iris. Thanks so much again for sharing like your tips and tricks and stories of how your team has been going about like launching and managing your taxonomy. I know a lot of other teams are going through very similar challenges in their org, and it's always so great to hear stories from people who like you've literally just been working through this with your team. So it's so great to hear your story. Thank you so much.
Yeah, of course. It was fun getting to talk about it.
Great. Okay, so those again are the 4 steps you can take to craft your taxonomy. Go ahead, we'll share out after this webinar session, the recording, the template. It's not yet published to the community, so we will get that up and out to you all as well. And we'll also share some of those other webinar resources around how to connect your tags to your templates, as well as ongoing governance and tidying of your taxonomy. I'm going to also, a little shout out to our Dovetail Slack community. Feel free to join that if you're not already there. You're always welcome to ask questions. Folks are sharing best practices, especially around the taxonomy piece. So feel free to join us there. And we have both people in the community who are sharing tips, as well as folks in our team on product design, customer facing. And we'll open up for Q&A.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much, Serena. Thank you for rolling with the punches. As many times as we run through the IT, there's always something that comes unexpectedly. I hope everyone found this useful. There's a few polls in the chat as well, but we did have a question from Brianna Cohens in regard to the tag board that you were demonstrating a little bit. And the question was, how would you be assigning each highlight in a customer interview with the tag customer interview in research for call type? And how do you use those types of research tags?
Yeah, that's a great question. So how I would approach it first was in that taxonomy board. Maybe I'll just go ahead and share it here, share my screen. So this taxonomy board is initially with the mindset of just helping you map out these different categories and possible tags. So this types of research tag group, actually really what I would do with this is where you can identify, maybe I have a specific tag board here for usability testing on the left-hand side, or a specific one for customer interviews. Then these tags themselves, you could actually probably just remove this group. This is more just for helping you build out your mental model, or actually turn these into note or insight fields. That's where I think it could be really helpful to be able to have that structured metadata for capturing, okay, for this note in your project, is this survey data or is this a customer interview? Because then you can, when you're surfacing those findings and you're saying, oh, I want to look at anytime I have talked to, these kinds of customers and it's survey data around this product area, you can then leverage the filters for that. So that's a really great question. It's a little more advanced practice, but I'd say, yeah, instead of using these as actual tags to highlight, it's more so just to help you kind of initially build the mental model for your taxonomy. Does that answer your question? Let me know in the chat here. Yeah, cool. I see your comment here, Brianna.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, we don't want to have way too many tags in there for sure. Yeah, so that's where I'd recommend if you find yourself thinking, actually, maybe is this better suited as a note or insight field as opposed to a tag? And I know that's a broader conversation, maybe for another webinar.
Well, that really segues perfectly into another question, Serena, that we got from Joshua Smith in the chat, which is, how do you balance the open-ended approaches to predefined tagging taxonomies? So allow to be building and creating new tags as they go, as opposed to using the share feature to kind of control a workspace tag board and just give them a predefined set of tags.
Yeah, totally. You may end up honestly having a mix. We often see with teams, you may have a mix of things unless you're really, really early in exploring something new and you're really just kind of keeping it very open-ended just to see what emerges. Most of the time, though, you still have some things that are going to be consistent across your organization, whether it's something like different product lines or your personas, things like that, which may already have some definition to them. So that's where you can think of, where do you want to have some consistency across the different types of projects you may be doing? And then another tip there, a pro tip there, is actually as part of your governance, you can have your folks on your team look at project level tags that they've been creating on the fly as they've been doing research, and actually start to identify which ones might they want to nominate to be a global tag, to then be part of a workspace tag board. So that's a great way to actually say, oh, this is what's coming up as I've just been doing my research. Maybe it's not already part of our workspace tags, but I think it'd make for a great one. And then you or the core team, your admin, can then decide, okay, actually, this would be great, and let's move that to be a workspace tag board.
Excellent. Yeah, thank you so much for that, Serena. One more we have here is, any tips on how to go through that second wave of analysis or insight surfacing once you're done tagging and have hundreds of highlights in a project?
Yeah, I mean, we could do a whole other webinar just on some tips for analysis. I like to think of it as going through, those multiple rounds of analysis. And that's where you may actually want to create multiple project views there on your left-hand side. You can always do a first pass and do some tags, and then from there, do the clustering and then say, oh, there are actually even more themes emerging within this one tag. Do a second round of tagging. So you can kind of go about it in, those multiple rounds of analysis. Another thing you can do is filter a view by a tag board or a tag group, just to get a little more granular. And then also shout out to AI clustering, which is a new feature in beta that we rolled out a few weeks ago. So you can give that a try too, if you're feeling overwhelmed by just, the sheer volume of tags to get started with. So give that a play around and see how that goes for you. Yeah, you're welcome.
Excellent. That's really all the questions we have in the chat today. I want to thank everyone so much for their participation. And anything else that comes up, we'll be sure to follow up individually. But thank you, Serena, so much for moderating today. This recording will go out in follow-up to everyone, and anyone who registered and didn't attend will have a recording as well. And I'm sure you'll find this on our YouTube channel in just a few days. So thank you all so much.
Awesome. Thanks for joining, everyone. Also want to give a shout out, as part of customer experience, we will be investing more in Dovetail community, running more webinars and best practices, and also things like a champion program, bringing Dovetail users together to share best practices. So if you're interested in that, we'll drop a link in the chat as just a general interest form. If you want to chat with us more about upcoming opportunities, we're right now very keen to co-create this with our customers. So just mark your interests and we'll follow up and reach out to you. Thanks again for joining today. Take care, everyone, and we'll talk soon. Bye.